All right, today's topic is the reproductive system. We're going to go through the male reproductive system, female reproductive system, and then we're also going to touch up on some of the major milestones in pregnancy. Remember that you have your pregnancy project, which is the last slide. I talk about that in class, not now during the lecture. That project is due when you come back from the break, the first couple of days when you come back, January 6 and 7. Actually, let me use this. It's a little better. All right. When we look at some of these questions, what would happen to you if your respiratory system collapsed, if your circulatory system basically stopped pushing blood? When we look at all these questions, yes, you could come up with the answer for all of them that would be that it would lead to ultimate death, obviously, except for the last one. Obviously, if your reproductive system failed, it doesn't mean that you would die. So the question that I pose is, does that make the reproductive system any less important than any of the other systems in the body? Now, see, these are the structures for the male reproductive system. We're going to start into the male reproductive system first that you need to know. Here on this particular slide, they're not in order, but they are in order later, and you need to know the order from the site of production of sperm all the way through to when it leaves the male body or the human body. The ones that you need to know: the seminal vesicle and the prostate gland. You're always going to see those kind of go hand in hand. They're side by side, and they basically, in a way, they do the same thing. The vas deferens, the long tube that sperm travels through, sperm but not urine, and that's important. The urethra, both bodily fluids, sperm, or rather semen, and urine travel through the urethra. And that kind of gives you a clue as to the locations if you're going to look at a picture of this for the first time and you don't know which is which. The epididymis is a location where sperm is basically stored until it matures, and you're going to see that side by side with the testicles. Testicles, both words kind of interchange, depends on where you see it, tomato kind of thing. The scrotum is the actual structure that you see visibly outside. It's the only structure, along with the penis, from the male reproductive system that you will see externally, okay, outside of the body. So, all right, so throughout the presentation, this is the question that I want you to pay attention to. And again, we had gone over this earlier in regards to those other systems being so important and life dependent upon them. How do they affect, how does the reproductive system and its failures affect our life? An individual can lead a healthy, happy life without reproducing. We know this to be true. However, the reproductive system can be thought of as, some scientists consider to be the single most important system in any species. So kind of in the back of your mind, kind of think why, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So, the main functions of the male reproductive system. Obviously, the male reproductive system's most important function is going to be to produce gametes. Gametes are, in the male, they are the sperm. So they produce it through the process of meiosis that we just covered. Once they produce it, then obviously the part of the reproductive system in the male is to not just produce the sperm, but to deliver the sperm. It can't just produce it in the testes or in the testicles, and then we have to figure out a way to get it into the female. So the male reproductive system also aids or assists in delivering that sperm to exit it out of the male body in a way during sexual intercourse that it'll enter the female. And it also produces male sex hormones. It's the male sex hormones, testosterone and so forth, are produced by the male reproductive system. So, the anatomy and the physiology, the structure and function of the male reproductive system, these are in order. So, I mentioned to you, now my pen doesn't want to work. I mentioned to you is it in a pen now? Yeah, it is. I mentioned to you, sorry for the pause, how some of these go hand in hand. In reality, you could actually consider the scrotum to be as kind of like number one, if you would. The scrotum is, like I said, the visual part that you see externally from the male. The testes and the epididymis kind of go side by side. The testicle will be kind of a round structure, and the epididymis will be kind of right beside it. And where sperm is produced here, it is then transferred into the epididymis and stored for maturity there. After that, sperm is going to leave through the vas deferens after that. Sperm needs a vehicle, an assistant, if you will, to be able to travel, not just through the rest of the male reproductive system, but also through the female reproductive system. That's what these two do right there. The seminal vesicle and the prostate gland add what we call seminal fluid to the sperm. It is what we typically refer to as semen. And that will assist that sperm. It will coat it, it will basically carry it, and it will assist it in traveling through, like the video that I showed you, through all that it has to go through. Finally, it will make its way through the urethra and exit the male body through the penis and into the vagina during sexual intercourse. Let me go back to this now. All right. So the male reproductive system, these are the structures and what they do. As I said, the testes are the primary functions that they have are to produce the sperm. The sperm is produced in the testicles and then transfers over to the epididymis, the location where sperm is going to be stored until it's matured. At that point, it will travel through the vas deferens. It's a long tube which connects the epididymis with the urethra. You're going to see it in the picture as the one that kind of curves all the way around. In that process, it makes a small connection with the prostate gland and the seminal vesicle, which are located side by side. The seminal vesicles secrete seminal fluid, and that's basically what we refer to as semen. It basically gives the bulk of semen to it. But then the prostate adds a slight milky fluid, if you will, to also assist in allowing sperm to travel. It's going to carry the sperm. So that's what the prostate gland does. It forms part of that seminal fluid. Let me go back, sorry. The urethra is the tube that connects the urinary bladder to the genitals for the removal of the fluid from the body. The penis is the organ that removes the semen and exits the body. And like I said, the scrotum is the sac-like structure that holds the testicles in place. All right, I had trouble with my pen a second ago. Let me fix that real quick before I continue. All right, let's go through these real quick based on what I've told you so far. And again, I know that you're just kind of taking a guess at a few of these, but let's go through these and see if you can get which ones these are. So, number one. Number one, located right here, is one of the structures that adds the bulk of semen. So which one would that be? That's going to be the seminal vesicle. I'll just put the letters because this writes really bad. All right, so the seminal vesicle is number one. Now, based on the fact that you, by the way, 2 and 9, we're going to kind of cross out because they're not part of the reproductive system. I just couldn't get a picture without them. Number 3, which one do you think number 3 is? It's a long tube that's connecting the testicles to the urethra. You can see the connection of the testicle here, and it basically travels up this way, and it comes and it connects to the urethra right here. So that would be the vas deferens. Okay? In this point right here at the vas deferens is where the connection to the seminal vesicle and this structure here, the prostate, they all connect to the vas deferens like that Y structure that I told you earlier. So this circle, well, we'll get to that one in a second. This is the vas deferens, the long tube that curves around. You should be able to spot that in a picture right away. Okay, it's the only one that's going to connect to the testicle down here, and it's basically going to curve up and around. And you're going to see it go past this right here, this circle. That's the prostate gland. All right, so I can go ahead and write that one in already. I'm just giving the abbreviations. Number 4, we know what number 4 is. Number 4 is the penis. Number 5, the tube that runs inside of the penis. And remember I told you earlier that both semen and urine travel through there. So number 5 is going to be the urethra. Just put a U there. Number 6, the site where sperm cells are produced. Those are going to be the testes or the testicles. And they are in this round external visual structure that is your scrotum. Number 8, as you can see, it's attached to the testicle. So what would that be? That is the, and I'll just put an E for epididymis. Number 10 is part of the human reproductive system, but you don't need to know it. It's just basically a small structure, a gland that also does the same thing that the prostate and the seminal vesicle do. It just adds fluid. The only thing that it also does is it helps in ejaculating the fluid in a fast manner out of the urethra. But you will not be assessed on that. All right, let me go back to my pointer, erase all this, and the next slide. All right, so going back to the question, an individual can lead to a healthy, happy life without reproducing. So why is this system, even if it fails and it's not going to kill you, why is this system considered to be one of the most important systems in the human species, or in any species for that matter? Because without it, you cannot reproduce. Okay? All right. We're going to follow the path here for this. We're going to sequence the path that sperm takes. What would be number 1? It's going to be the testicles. What would be number 2? It's going to be the epididymis. Number 3 is going to be the vas deferens, the tube. And then along the top part of that tube is going to be a connection to the prostate gland and seminal vesicle. Here is where semen and the alkaline fluid is added, and then finally it connects to the urethra and exits through the penis. All right, that's basically it for the male reproductive system. Now the female reproductive system is much simpler than the male reproductive system. There are only 5 structures in the female reproductive system that we need to know. The ovaries, the fallopian tubes, the uterus, cervix, and the vagina. Not to say, however, that the male reproductive system, because it's more complex, is more important. On the contrary, I actually find the female reproductive system to be, you can't make a baby one without the other, but I find in certain ways the female reproductive system to have a greater importance, simply because a lot more occurs here. But again, there would probably be people that would disagree with me on that. All right, now based on this, and I guess I should kind of come back to this one, well, I can't, because then you're going to see the answers, but based on what we know, and I've already discussed ovaries and fallopian tubes and the uterus and so forth in class a little bit, so you have a little bit of background knowledge with some of these, and we just discussed the male structures. So based on these 2 lists, which similarities can you find between one structure in the male and its counterpart, if you will, in the female? Somebody is saying testes and ovaries. Would the testes and ovaries be similar? Yes, they would, because that's where the site of the gametes are produced. Anything else? What about the epididymis? Would the epididymis have a similar counterpart in the female? All right, so the epididymis probably does not have something similar to it. The scrotum obviously does not as well either. What about the vas deferens? Does the vas deferens have a similar structure on this side? It would be the fallopian tube, because that's where the gametes are going to pass through. Seminal vesicle and the prostate gland do not have a similar structure on the female side. The urethra does not as well in terms of these structures. However, the penis does, because the penis and the vagina are the 2 sexual organs that kind of make all this possible. So here are our answers. Again, we just went through it, but the testes and the ovaries both produce the gametes and the sex hormones. The vas deferens and the fallopian tubes both carry the gametes away from their site of production and to the other areas in the counterparts. And the penis and the vagina are both the structures that assist in the delivery of the sperm. Again, it's good to note that the vagina assists in the delivery of sperm. Sperm is the male gamete. Okay, Okay, but when you saw the video, and when we go through this, and you do your pregnancy project, you'll see how the vagina assists in the delivery of sperm. All right, here's the picture of the female reproductive system. I said 5 structures is all you need to know. Very simple, but highly important. So it's not really that complex. Now, what are the functions of the female reproductive system? Well, again, also just like the male, to produce the gametes by meiosis, that would be in the female the eggs, to accept those male gametes into it, and also to nourish and develop that offspring. The female reproductive system not only does the beginning portion of the work, but it also nourishes and helps to develop that offspring. It's part of the reason why I consider the female reproductive system to be just a tad more important than the male. And again, just a tad is an understatement. And it also produces the female sex hormones as well. This is the vaginal canal. So during sexual intercourse, the video spoke about how some of the sperm will exit the vagina. And this is the cervix. And by the way, gravity is going to assist in that. Now that cervix is that small little opening right here. Remember the second wave of sperm that stay behind courting the folds of the cervix? This is the area right here where they stay. And then they finally make it up through. Here is the uterus. And again, they're going to run into the white blood cells here. The uterus goes through contractions to kind of assist. This area right here is a pretty large area for them to travel through. So those uteral contractions assist in moving the millions of sperm through this path. And eventually they get to this portion where they have to either go left or right. And half are going to go this way, and half are going to go the other way. If this ovary is the one that produced the egg on that month, which we refer to as the ovum, then all the sperm cells that travel this way end up not doing anything on that month. Again, this is just a close-up picture of the same thing. The basics of the anatomy and physiology of the female reproductive system. You get a little better picture of it. The vagina, also known as the vaginal canal. The cervix, typically closed, but only opens when the female is ovulating or ready for ovulation. The uterus, and we're going to kind of learn a little bit about how that uterine lining comes apart, which accounts for a typical menstrual cycle. You have your fallopian tubes and an ovary at the end of the fallopian tube. It's also good to note that the fallopian tube and the ovaries do have a very small gap between them. And so these structures, referred to as the cilia of the fallopian tube, they actually pull that ovum. That ovum is actually suspended, I can't say in midair because it's not an air environment there, but it's suspended in this fluid environment, and the fallopian tube actually comes with these cilia here and will basically pull the ovum in. The ovum, the egg, will basically sit right here at that first curve, and that is where it awaits. That's where it awaits for the sperm to arrive. There's a better picture coming of it, about it, in a slide coming up. All right, so real quick, let me go back to this. All right, number 1. What is number 1? Right, those are the fallopian tubes. What is number 2? Number 2 would be the uterus. Kind of a U there. What would be number 3? That would be the vagina. Number 4? Number 4 would be the cervix. And number 5 would be your ovaries. Okay, good. All right, now we get into the reproductive system of both, kind of a comparison of both. Again, we just kind of went over these now. You can use this as a practice test, if you will, and then test yourself later to see if you are correct. All right, the reproductive system. This is the question that I want you to kind of keep in the back of your mind. The reproductive system is where all this takes place. Now we're going to summarize all the changes that occurred during each of the 3 trimesters into where we get the development of that embryo or that fetus. I told you just a minute ago that there was a better picture of this right here. You can see where the fallopian tube has the cilia that basically pulls that ovum into this part right here. And in that curve, that egg is going to sit there and await for the sperm to arrive. In the video, they talked about the zona pellucida. This liquid-filled space right here, that's the zona pellucida. So the corona radiata, this outer part, the sperm is going to arrive. It's going to make it through that first and try and penetrate that first layer. It finally makes it through the corona until it finally reaches the liquid-filled space, the zona pellucida. When it lies down on that zona pellucida, all that fluid is basically going to what? Cover over that sperm cell. And when it does that, inside it's going to pull it in. Remember the part in the video where it just kind of just pulled it in to that white fluid? Well, that's this right here. And on that first day, all it's going to do is it's going to eventually start dividing, start duplicating and duplicating into multiple cells. All right, so some of the processes that can make this happen. Growth, the increase in the number of cells. We also have development. Again, we're starting out with one cell, but that one cell eventually is going to change into different types of cells. We refer to that as differentiation, the specialization or the formation of specialized cells. Remember how we talked about how the one cell is going to start going through the process of differentiation and forming bone cells, blood cells, skin cells, nerve cells to form that first embryo that's basically going to be the attachment of the brain and the spinal cord. And a very important process in that is neurulation, which I'll get to in a second. This picture is great. This picture shows the day-by-day process of right after the ovary is produced, right after the ovum is produced by the ovary, it basically releases it. The fallopian tube collects it and it's going to sit here on day 0, the day that she is ovulating. You can barely see it, but you can kind of see the sperm reaching up to the ovum and then penetrating it and fertilizing the egg. Once that occurs, and this picture down here kind of shows that, once that occurs, then the egg is going to start its travel through the fallopian tube back this way. The same travel that the sperm made coming up, now the egg is going to do it going back. Now on the first day is where it's going to form its first cleavage, this little separation right there. And when it does that, now you have what we call a 2-cell stage. A day later, that 2 becomes 4. And if you continue and continue the path, it's very important till we get to right here, day 8, the form of what we call a blastocyst. And on that 8th or 9th day, that blastocyst is going to attach here to the uteral lining. It does that to eventually establish the placenta, and through that, it's going to form that neurulation, that cord that is going to eventually be the arteries and blood supply and oxygen supply and supply of nutrient from mother to offspring. We're talking about obviously the umbilical cord. And wherever the blastocyst attaches to the uterus, that's where the placenta eventually is going to form into that umbilical cord. Implantation obviously is a very important part. That's where the gastrula is going to form. The gastrula is basically a cell comprised of, we're going to refer to them as 3 layers, if you will. And here is, again, where differentiation really starts to kick in. Okay? You can see here in this chart, the ectoderm layer is going to be that outside layer. Then you have the germ cells taking part underneath. Inside the middle is going to be the mesoderm, and these are all the different types of cells, specialized cells, that are going to form in there. And then you have the endoderm, the internal layer all the way on the inside, and is basically responsible for the formation or differentiation of lung cells, thyroid cells, and pancreatic cells, which are also very important. This is a great picture to show that for you. And like I said, during this part, this is those day 1 going all the way up to day 8 or so. Neurulation, I spoke about a few minutes ago. So neurulation is important because if you take the prefix of that word, neurons, this is where your nervous system starts to connect. Your nervous system is going to be those neural tubes that are going to form and connect brain to the spinal cord. And that's basically the biggest and most important structure in that zygote at the very beginning. This is basically how it forms. You have a neural plate that's basically going to fold inward, and it's going to form a tube-like structure. This tissue is going to fuse up here and eventually close. You have your neural tube along with your nodal cord and other neural crest cells that pick up, those are the ones that pick up the signals when contact, for example, is being made up here on this external tissue. Neurulation is very important. It's basically what develops the nervous system, and we all know that the nervous system is one of the most important systems, a very vital system in the body. So this picture here shows you how neurulation occurs. All right, some of the important structures. The placenta. The placenta is very important because this is how the baby receives oxygen. This is how the baby during those 9 months is going to receive blood, is going to receive nutrients from whatever it is that mom eats. Connected to the placenta is going to be your umbilical cord. It's the cord. At this stage, for example, even the immune system of the baby is given through the umbilical cord from mom's immune system. Now this baby, I want to mention, is in a great environment. So it isn't like it has to really fight off too much. But that's how it's going to develop it. So obviously it's very important. The umbilical cord gives everything from nutrients to blood cells to nourishment and so forth, and even oxygen. The baby right now is dependent upon everything for its mother all the way up until that umbilical cord is cut. At that point, then the baby becomes independent of the mom, to a certain degree, obviously. The amniotic sac. I don't remember if I talked to you about what an amniocentesis is, but the amniotic sac is the sac, the fluid-filled sac that this baby is going to develop in for those 9 months. And it's filled with amniotic fluid. The amniotic fluid, believe it or not, you can find DNA of this child floating around in the amniotic fluid. Excuse me. I spoke about the amniocentesis. It's a test to see if there's something wrong with this child. It's done in the middle of pregnancy, and a needle is going to penetrate through the belly, if you will, of the female, and it's going to withdraw some of this amniotic fluid. And they test the amniotic fluid to see if there's something wrong with the child. I don't want to get too heavily into that because, again, that's not even assessed on the EOC. But the amniotic fluid keeps the cushion for the baby during those 9 months. All right, some of the milestones of the first trimester. All organ systems obviously are going to begin to form in that first trimester. You're going to get your first heartbeat during that first trimester. Neurulation begins to form during this first trimester. And here, the embryo is actually going to begin to move. Now again, no female will feel that movement during the first trimester. It's way, way, way too small. Okay? And also things like the ears, eyelids, and little teeth buds are going to start to form during the first trimester. This is going to be approximately the first 12, 13 weeks of pregnancy. Your second trimester, this is actually where the most growth is going to occur. In terms of percentages, this is where your most growth occurs. Your skeleton is going to start to form. And here is where the mother is going to first feel her first movement of that fetus. At some point at this stage, the fetus can actually start to hear, and to a certain degree they've actually been seen to respond to light as well as sound. If you took a flashlight and put it up to the mother's belly later in the second trimester, there's small video footages that I've seen where the baby will actually react and put his hands up, kind of shying away from the bright light. And they do respond to sound during the later portions of the second trimester as well. So obviously that's important because neurulation has obviously taken quite a few leaps and bounds at this point for the auditory and visual cortexes of the brain, not only to be active, but for that optic nerve and that auditory nerve to have actually started development as well during that phase. And then some of the big milestones during the third trimester. The third trimester, the baby is basically getting ready. Baby is, I hate to say it this way, but the baby is basically fattening up, if you will. And in one of the major things in getting ready is where the baby is actually going to turn to the point where it's going to spend 24/7 head down. Okay? Babies have to be delivered head down. It's very, very, very dangerous both to the mother and the child if a baby were to be born or delivered not head first. A whole bunch of different things, paralysis and so forth, can occur with that. Not to say that head first is going to be completely safe, because the shoulders also cause a big problem as well. But babies basically understand that head first is the way to go, and they basically get themselves ready that way. They start to develop a greasy film all over their skin. It keeps their skin moist so that they don't dry out as well, even when they kind of come out as well. The lungs maturing, that's actually one of the last things that occur in the third trimester. And it tells here that in the third trimester, fetus can actually see light and react to sounds. But they've also been known to do that in the later portions of the second trimester as well. But they really do this much more, to a greater degree, in the third trimester. All right, birth takes place anywhere from around week 38 to 40. Anywhere before week 38, technically, that child is considered premature. Even if it's by 1 week, it might not be that big of a deal, but believe it or not, in weeks 36 and around 35, 36, that's where the lungs actually fully mature. So if a child were to be born at week 36, even though it's just 2 weeks premature, that child might need to be placed in incubation until the lungs fully mature a week or so later. The muscles in the vagina and the cervix are going to relax. That basically allows dilation. Female needs to dilate that cervix to about 10 centimeters. It's about that big. Okay, so you're going to fit in a space that small. At that point, contractions from the uterus are going to start to force that baby out. And so what's going to happen is, excuse me, the uterus is going to basically section off into 2 parts. Let me not say that, I'm sorry. It's going to form in 2 different ways. The uterus on this part here, let me get my pencil real quick. The uterus in this part here is going to harden, and it's going to start to contract. It's going to start to shrink. The reason it does that is, what's it doing? If this becomes harder and smaller, what is it forcing? It's forcing the baby down and out. This part of the uterus becomes soft, so that the baby can basically determine the shape of that uterus there, and basically not have another obstacle to come out. I don't know if I have a picture of a mucus plug coming up, but I'm pretty sure I do. But there's a plug that is here that eventually is going to come out. And once that happens, that amniotic sac is going to break, and baby can start to make its way down and out into the world. If I wait, there we go. All right, the changes that occur. So let's go through some of these changes that occur during each of the trimesters. Oh, sorry. Where's the picture I wanted? I guess I don't have a picture of the mucus plug. But anyway, it basically just forms right here. Like I said, then the baby is going to crown, which means that that first part of that head is going to show. And the baby's actually going to turn his face toward the spinal column here. That is part of that pain. The female is going to feel a constant back pain because baby is actually facing this way, and he's basically compressing all the nerves of the spinal column here. So there is something called an epidural that a female can take, and it's basically going to numb all these nerves here. So when the baby is basically turning this way and forcing that constant back pain during the time that the epidural is in effect, then she won't feel that constant back pain. But eventually that baby is going to work its way down and out. And that's, in a nutshell, that's the process of birth. All right, this is the slide that talks about what I refer to as the pregnancy project. Just really quick, you need to identify the time frames. At what week does the first trimester stop and the second start? And at what week does the second stop and the third start? Try to be creative, come up with some kind of way to do that. Like I said, when you put this on your poster board, you could, the example up on the wall uses colors to show first to second, second to third. She did the first in purple, the second in blue, and the third in green. So you have an indication there of that. You need to label and define with illustrations these terms. You need to label and define implantation, neurulation. Make sure that you also look up when the brain and the spinal column become complete. When they become complete. You're going to label at some point in there when the heart begins to beat, when the placenta is completed, and when the major organs are in place. I want you to label when the major organs of the baby are in place. The heart, the lungs, the kidney, those. Label when the sex organs are visible. Try to make sure that you use a reliable source for that, because you're going to see conflicting reports out there as to when those sex organs are visible. And then when birth occurs, which is pretty obvious at the very end. Again, this project is worth 3 grades, and you're going to complete the 40 weeks for this on a poster board. This is going to be done during the break, and you bring it when you come back. If you want to bring it back on the Tuesday, the January 7th, that is fine. And that goes for all periods 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Monday that we come back is a 1-3-5 day. If you don't want to bring it back on that Monday, you want to bring it on Tuesday, and you're in my 1st, 3rd, and 5th, that is okay, that is acceptable. Okay, and that completes human reproduction.